My dad called me a loser in front of everyone at our family reunion. I smiled, excused myself, and walked out. The Carter family reunion was held at my father's big house on the hill, the one with the long gravel driveway and the American flag hanging by the porch. I hadn't been back home in 5 years. My stomach twisted the moment I parked. Inside, the house buzzed with laughter, plates clinking, cousins I barely recognized. My dad, Ray Carter, stood near the fireplace, tall and loud, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked at me like he was already disappointed. "Lena's finally here," he announced when he saw me. "Still working that little desk job in the city?" His voice carried across the room. A few relatives chuckled. I forced a smile. Dinner started calm enough. My brother Evan talked about his business, the one Dad helped him start, and how he'd just bought a new truck. Dad beamed at him, pride all over his face. Then he turned to me. "And what about you, Lena? Still renting that tiny apartment? Still single?" Everyone went quiet. I could feel my face burn. "I'm doing fine," I said softly, but he wasn't done. "Fine. You're almost 30, and you've done nothing worth mentioning." He laughed like it was a joke, but no one else laughed. Mom looked down at her plate. Evan smirked. The cousins pretended to check their phones. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to scream. But I just sat there frozen. Then Dad added, "Some people are just born without drive. Guess we know which one you are." That was it. I stood up, my hands shaking. I pushed in my chair, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "Thanks for dinner," I said quietly. "It's been memorable." The room was dead silent as I walked out. My heels clicked against the tile, and for the first time, I didn't look back. Outside, the air felt cold and sharp. My car was parked under the old oak tree, the one Dad planted the year I was born. I sat inside, gripping the steering wheel, my breath uneven. Inside that house, laughter slowly picked up again, like nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed. Every cruel word echoed in my head. Loser, nothing average. They cut deep, but underneath the pain, something else stirred, anger, quiet and steady. As I drove away from the house, the lights in my rearview mirror grew smaller until they disappeared. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty, and I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. Not to that house. Not to that version of me who sat there and took it. That night, something inside me broke, and something new began to form. The road was almost empty, only my headlights cutting through the dark. I didn't have a plan or a place to go. I just drove, turning down old roads I hadn't seen in years. My father's voice kept replaying in my head, over and over, every word sharper than before. I gripped the steering wheel until my hands ached. It felt like no matter how far I drove, his words followed me, sitting heavy in the car with me. I passed the same fields and gas stations I'd known as a kid. Everything looked smaller now, worn down, like time had eaten away at it. At one point, I pulled over near the edge of town and just sat there, watching the dark stretch out around me. I thought about calling someone, but there wasn't anyone I trusted enough anymore. After a while, I noticed a small light up ahead, a flickering neon sign that said Mel's Diner. I hadn't seen it since high school. I remembered sneaking in there with friends after football games, ordering fries and pretending to be grown-ups. I don't know why, but I drove toward it. Inside, the diner smelled like coffee and fried onions. It was almost empty except for a trucker half asleep in the corner. The waitress behind the counter looked about 50, with tired eyes but a kind face. Her name tag said Marlene. She gave me a small smile. "Rough night?" she asked. I didn't mean to talk, but once I started, I couldn't stop. The words just spilled out, about my dad, the reunion, the way he embarrassed me. I told her how I'd walked out, how I felt like I had nothing left. She just listened, leaning on the counter, nodding sometimes, not judging me. When I was done, I stared into my coffee cup. "Maybe he's right," I said. "Maybe I really am just average." Marlene shook her head slowly. "You're not average, honey. You're hurt. And hurt can look a lot like failure if you stay down too long." She poured me another cup. Sometimes hitting rock bottom is just the start of the climb. Her words stuck in my mind. Simple but true. No one had ever said something like that to me before. We talked a little more, small things about the town, the weather, the pie that she swore was the best in 3 counties. When I left, she gave me a to-go cup and said, "Come back when things get better. You'll want to see this place again." Outside, the air felt colder but cleaner somehow. I sat in my car for a while, watching my breath fog the window. I thought about my life. How much of it I'd spent trying to prove something to people who never cared to see it. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself. I wasn't going to live for anyone's approval anymore. From then on, it was going to be about strength, mine and no one else's. The apartment was freezing when I got home. I turned the old heater on, but it only gave a weak buzz before falling quiet again. I sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the peeling wallpaper and the unpaid bills scattered in front of me. My body felt heavy, my chest tight, but my mind wouldn't stop moving. Something inside me had changed. I didn't want to live like this anymore. I didn't want to keep feeling small. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed and went to work. The office was the same as always, fluorescent lights, humming computers, and tired faces pretending to care. I sat at my desk, answering calls and typing reports for people who didn't even remember my name. But instead of feeling trapped, I started watching. I noticed how the managers talked, how they made choices, how they handled money. I realized I'd been standing still for years, waiting for someone to give me permission to move forward. That night, I sat on the floor with my laptop and searched for night classes. I didn't know what I wanted yet, but accounting caught my eye. Numbers didn't lie, and I needed something solid to build on. I filled out the form, even though I didn't know how I'd pay for it. When the confirmation email came, I stared at it for a long time. It felt like a small door had opened, one I hadn't even known was there. Work became different after that. I stayed late, asked questions, took notes on things no one else cared about. My boss barely noticed, but I didn't mind. I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it for me. One night, as I was shutting down my computer, Zach from the accounting department stopped by my desk. He was tall, with kind eyes and a calm way of speaking that made people listen. "You're still here?" he asked, smiling. "Yeah," I said, trying to learn something new. He laughed softly. "You and me both. You ever think about taking classes? You'd be good with numbers." I looked up at him, surprised. "Actually, I just signed up." "That's great," he said. "If you ever need help, I can lend you my notes." After that, we started talking more. Lunch breaks turned into long conversations, sometimes about work, sometimes about life. He told me how he wanted to start his own business one day, how he was tired of people who thought too small. I understood that feeling more than anyone. At night, I came home tired but different. My body hurt from the long days, but my heart felt steady. I studied at my kitchen table, surrounded by silence and cold air, but for the first time in years, I felt warm inside. I wasn't where I wanted to be yet, but I had a plan, and that was enough to keep me going. A year passed before I even noticed how much had changed. The long nights, the extra hours, the classes after work, they all started to pay off. One morning, my manager called me into his office. I thought I had made a mistake, but instead he said, "Lena, you've been working harder than anyone here. We'd like to promote you." For a moment, I just stared at him. The words didn't sink in right away. Then it hit me, I had done it. It wasn't a dream job or a big raise, but it was mine. I walked back to my desk, trying not to smile too hard, but inside, it felt like the ground under me had finally stopped shaking. A few weeks later, I moved into a better apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it had real windows that let in sunlight and a kitchen that didn't leak. I bought a secondhand couch and a small table. For the first time, my place didn't feel temporary. It felt like a beginning. At work, people started treating me differently. My ideas mattered now. I spoke up in meetings without feeling my voice shake. I started to walk taller, to meet people's eyes instead of avoiding them. When I caught my reflection in the elevator mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I finally looked sure. Zach noticed the change too. We still talked often, and one evening, after everyone else had left the office, he asked if I wanted to grab dinner. I said yes. We went to a small Italian place near the office and talked about everything: work, family, dreams. He told me I seemed stronger lately, more certain. Then he looked at me for a long moment and said, "Lena, I like you. I mean more than just as a friend." His voice was quiet, nervous even. I felt warmth rush to my face. I liked him too. He had been kind when I needed it most. But deep down, I knew I wasn't ready. I was still climbing, still building. I didn't want to depend on anyone again. "Zach," I said softly, "you mean a lot to me, but right now I need to focus on myself. I hope you understand." He nodded, a little disappointed but respectful. "I get it. You've got a good thing going, Lena. Don't stop." When I got home that night, I sat on my new couch and looked around the apartment. For the first time, Everything felt steady. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I was building something real, piece by piece, on my own terms. Still, sometimes when the room went quiet, I could hear my father's voice echoing in my head. You'll never be more than average. I used to believe him. But now, every step forward was proof that he was wrong. And that thought kept me going. It was a quiet Saturday morning when I got the call from my cousin Megan. We hadn't talked in years, so her voice on the phone instantly made me uneasy. She didn't waste time with small talk. Lena, she said, I thought you should know. There's talk going around about your dad's business. Something about missing money. I frowned. Missing money? Yeah. People are saying one of the employees stole a huge amount. But I heard from someone inside. It wasn't the employee. It was Evan. For a moment, I didn't believe her. Evan, my golden brother, could do no wrong in my father's eyes. Still, the way she said it, steady and certain, made my stomach twist. Are you sure? I asked quietly. Pretty sure, she said. Your dad covered it up. Fired the employee to make it look clean. But everyone close to him knows the truth. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. A part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, the part that still remembered being humiliated at that dinner table, refused to stay quiet. That evening, I called my father. He answered on the second ring, his voice as sharp as ever. Lena, you haven't called in months. I heard something today, I said. About the company. About Evan. There was a pause. Then a short laugh. You've been talking to people again, huh? Don't believe gossip. Just tell me the truth, I said. Did he steal the money? The silence on the other end was all the answer I needed. You fired someone innocent, I said slowly. You destroyed someone's life to protect him. My father's tone turned cold. That's family business. You don't understand what's at stake. I understand that you let your favorite son get away with theft, I said, my voice shaking now. And you called me a loser because I wouldn't play your games. He let out a long sigh, the kind that made me feel small even through the phone. Evan made a mistake, he said. But he's still worth 10 of you. Those words hit harder than any insult he'd ever thrown. 10 of me. He didn't even hesitate. I felt something inside me harden. You'll regret saying that, I said quietly. He laughed again, dismissive as always. You always were dramatic. Don't waste your time trying to prove a point. I'm not proving a point, I said. I'm changing everything. Then I hung up. For a long time, I just sat there staring at the blank wall in front of me. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't from sadness anymore. It was anger. Clear, steady anger. If my father thought I was worthless, I'd build something so big he couldn't ignore it. Not for his approval, but to show him exactly what he threw away. From that moment, my purpose was set. I wasn't going to be his disappointment anymore. I was going to be his reminder. The years that followed were a blur of work, exhaustion, and quiet victories. I didn't talk to my family anymore. I didn't visit, didn't call, didn't answer messages. I put all of my energy into one thing, building a life that was mine. Every day started before sunrise and ended long after midnight. While others rested, I kept going. At my job, I had learned every detail about how the business worked. I studied everything I could about finance and management. Numbers made sense to me. They were clean, logical, and couldn't lie like people did. The more I learned, the more I realized I didn't need to work for anyone else. I wanted freedom. I wanted to build something with my own hands. One night, sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups, I made the decision. I quit my job. My boss was surprised, maybe even a little sorry to lose me, but I didn't explain. I just said, it's time. Starting a business wasn't easy. I worked out of my apartment at first, using a folding table as my desk. My savings barely covered the basics, an old laptop, cheap software, and business cards I printed myself. The first few months were hard. Some days, I thought I'd made a mistake. But slowly, things began to change. One client turned into 2. Then 3. People liked how I worked, honest, fast, and reliable. Word spread. Before long, I could afford a small office downtown. It wasn't fancy, but when I hung my name on the door, Carter Financial Consulting, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not the kind my father demanded, but the kind that comes from knowing you did it all yourself. I hired my first employee 6 months later. Then another. By the 3rd year, I had 10 people working for me, smart, hardworking, loyal. We weren't a big firm, but we were respected. Clients trusted us. The business was growing faster than I ever imagined. Sometimes I'd stand by the office window late at night, looking out at the city lights, thinking about how far I'd come. No one knew how much it cost me to get here. The sleepless nights, the loneliness, the constant pressure to prove myself. But I didn't complain. This was my choice, my path. I never told my family what I was doing. Not once. They didn't deserve to know. Every contract I signed, every deal I closed, felt like a quiet victory against the memory of that reunion. My success was my secret weapon, a private revenge. When people asked about my motivation, I just smiled and said, I like to keep busy. But deep down, I knew the truth. Every number, every dollar, every win was proof that I had become everything my father said I couldn't be. And I didn't need him to see it. Just knowing it myself was enough. The letter came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. It was in a thick white envelope with gold edges, the kind used for weddings or fancy events. My name was written in neat handwriting across the front. I almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail, until I saw the name at the bottom of the invitation inside. Evan Carter. It was for my father's 60th birthday party. A grand celebration, it said, hosted by my brother at the family estate. The same house I had walked out of years ago. The same place where my father had called me a loser in front of everyone. For a moment, I just stared at it. I could almost hear his voice again, the laughter, the pitying looks from relatives. My first instinct was to tear the invitation in half and throw it in the trash. I didn't owe them anything. I had built my own life, my own success. I didn't need to prove myself anymore. But then, near the bottom of the letter, I noticed something, a printed list of guests. I recognized the names immediately. The same people who had been there that night. Old family friends, local business owners, people who had seen me humiliated and said nothing. A strange feeling crept over me. I wasn't angry, not like before. It was something colder, steadier. I thought about how far I'd come, everything I'd built from nothing, everything I'd done on my own. These people still thought of me as the girl who walked out in tears. They had no idea who I'd become. I read the invitation again. It said formal attire. Dinner and speeches to follow. I could almost picture it. My father in his suit, Evan pretending to be perfect, everyone pretending they hadn't watched him cover up a crime. The thought made me laugh quietly. For years, I had dreamed of showing them who I really was. I didn't want revenge anymore, not the kind that screams or destroys. I wanted silence, the kind that fills a room when people realize they were wrong. I set the letter down on my desk and stared at the city skyline outside my office window. My reflection looked calm, strong. The woman staring back wasn't the one who had been humiliated. She was the one who had rebuilt herself from ashes. I took a deep breath, folded the invitation carefully, and slipped it back into the envelope. I wasn't sure why, but I felt ready. Not nervous. Not afraid. Just ready. That night, as I locked up the office and walked out into the cool evening air, I made my decision. I was going to that party. But I wasn't going as the daughter who had once begged for approval. I was going as the woman they never expected to see again. The one who didn't need their permission to shine. The night of the party came faster than I expected. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the black dress I had chosen. Simple but sharp, the kind that spoke without needing to say a word. My hair was neatly pinned, and my makeup was calm, clean, confident. When I slipped on my heels and grabbed my car keys, I didn't feel nervous. Just steady. Outside, my new car gleamed under the streetlights. It wasn't the most expensive model, but it was mine, paid for in full. As I drove through the familiar streets toward my father's estate, memories tried to creep in. That night at the reunion, his laughter, the sting of humiliation. I pushed them aside. I wasn't that woman anymore. When I pulled up to the house, I barely recognized it. Strings of golden lights hung across the driveway, and music floated through the open doors. Expensive cars lined the lawn, the kind of scene my father lived for. A valet opened my door, and I stepped out, feeling 100 eyes on me already. Inside, the room was crowded with laughter, champagne, and polished smiles. I could feel the change in the air as soon as people noticed me. The chatter softened. A few faces turned, then more, until almost everyone was watching. I saw recognition flicker in their eyes. Confusion, surprise, curiosity. Evan spotted me first. He walked over, his usual smug grin already in place. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," he said. "Didn't think you'd come back after all this time." I smiled. "I wasn't planning to," I said calmly. "But I heard it was an important night." He gave a short laugh. "You still working those office jobs?" His tone was light, but the insult was sharp beneath it. Before I could answer, one of the guests standing nearby spoke up. Wait, Carter Financial Consulting, right? You own that company, don't you? Evan's grin faltered for a second. I nodded. Yes, that's mine. More people turned to look. Someone else said, I've heard of that firm. You've grown fast. Murmurs spread through the crowd. The air shifted. The same people who once looked down on me were suddenly impressed. Then I saw him, my father. Ray Carter stood across the room, glass in hand, staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. He looked older than I remembered, his proud posture a little weaker now. When I met his eyes, I saw the flicker, that brief, unmistakable flash of fear before he covered it with a smile. He walked over slowly, putting on his best show. Lena, he said, his voice louder than it needed to be. Didn't expect to see you tonight. You've done well for yourself. I held his gaze. Yes, I have. Around us, people watched silently, pretending not to. I could tell he hated it, the attention shifting away from him, the realization that I had built something bigger than he ever imagined. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. The night had turned quieter as the music softened and the guests gathered near the center of the room for speeches. My father stood at the front, his hand resting on Evan's shoulder. The same old proud smile stretched across his face as he thanked everyone for coming. People clapped, laughed at his jokes, and raised their glasses. It was all so rehearsed, so familiar. I stood near the back, watching the show I'd seen my whole life, the perfect family image he loved to project. Then he spotted me again. And I'd like to thank my daughter, Lena, for being here tonight, he said loudly, as if trying to prove something. She's done well for herself lately, I hear. Took her a while, but she got there. The laughter that followed was small but sharp. He still couldn't help himself. Something inside me went very still. I didn't plan to say anything that night, but the words rose up before I could stop them. I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the floor. Actually, I said, my voice steady and clear, there's something I'd like to say too. The room went quiet. My father's smile froze. Evan shifted uncomfortably beside him. I stood under the lights, looking around the room, at the same faces that had watched me shrink years ago. This time, I didn't feel nervous. You all remember the last time I was here, I began. My father made sure of that. He wanted everyone to know how much of a failure I was. What he didn't mention that night was what was happening inside his own company. Evan took a step forward. Lena, this isn't the time. No, it is, I said calmly. Since you like to talk about success and family pride, let's be honest. When money went missing from the company, it wasn't an employee who took it. It was you, Evan. And Dad, you knew it. The sound in the room shifted, whispers, gasps, chairs moving slightly. My father's face turned red, his jaw tight. That's enough, he said, his voice low but shaking. I didn't stop. You let someone else take the blame. You ruined a man's career to protect your son, and you called it loyalty. But it wasn't loyalty, it was favoritism. It always has been. He tried to speak, but no one looked at him. Everyone's eyes were on me. I felt a calm I'd never felt before. You called me a loser once, I said quietly. But everything I built on my own. Without your help. Without your approval. And I'm done carrying the weight of what you think of me. The silence that followed was thick. My father's hand trembled as he set his glass down. Evan wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked around one last time, then turned and walked toward the doors. No one stopped me. No one laughed this time. The night air hit my face as I stepped outside, cool and clean. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The morning after the party, I woke up to sunlight spilling through my curtains. For the first time in years, I didn't feel heavy. There was no anger sitting in my chest, no old shame trying to pull me back. Just quiet, the kind that feels clean. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the city come alive below. Everything looked the same, but somehow, everything felt different. In the days that followed, I threw myself back into work. My business was growing faster than ever, and my team had become like a second family. We celebrated small wins, stayed late on projects, laughed during breaks. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. Not from my father, not from anyone. I was building something that mattered, something that was fully mine. A few weeks later, I booked a trip. It was the first time I'd taken time off since I'd started the company. I visited new cities, tried food I couldn't pronounce, sat alone in cafes with no one expecting anything from me. I didn't feel lost or lonely, I felt free. I had spent so many years trying to prove my worth to people who didn't want to see it. Now, I didn't need their eyes on me at all. When I came back home, there was a message waiting from Zach. We hadn't talked much since that night I turned him down, but his text was simple. Dinner sometime? No pressure. I smiled when I read it. I thought about everything he'd seen in me back when I was still finding my footing. This time, I said yes. Dinner was easy, like we had just paused and picked up again. We talked about work, travel, and the past few years. There was no rush, no pretending. Just two people who had both grown into themselves. I didn't know what the future would bring, and for once, I didn't feel the need to plan every step. I was exactly where I needed to be. Months passed, and one morning, an envelope arrived at my office. I recognized the handwriting instantly, my father's. I held it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a short letter. He wrote that he had been wrong, that he was proud of me, that he wished we could start over. The words felt careful, like he was trying to patch up something too broken to fix. I folded the letter and set it in a drawer. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel sad. Some things didn't need to be undone. They just needed to be left behind. Later that morning, I stepped outside. The air was crisp, the sunlight soft against my face. I walked down the street, past people rushing to work, past everything that used to scare me. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I had already won, not by beating anyone else, but by finally becoming myself.